Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story you've probably never heard of, the sequel to one of the most famous tales of damnation ever told. So, we all know the story of Dr. Faustus, right? The brilliant guy who sells his soul to the devil. But have you ever wondered what happened after he was dragged screaming to hell? Well, believe it or not, the story doesn't just stop there. Let's get into the wild tale of the guy who inherited Faustus' magic books and his curse. All right, here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at this forgotten sequel, get to know the apprentice who walks in his master's shadow, check out his kind of weird deal with a demon, follow him on his magical world tour, and finally, figure out why this whole thing still matters. Okay, so get this. Just a few years after the original Faust story blew everyone's minds, a direct sequel pops up in 1593, and it picks up right at the end of the first one, with Faust's very messy demise. It's called the Wagner Book, and it completely flips the script. This isn't about one legendary scholar's epic fall from grace anymore. Nope. This story is all about how that cycle of sin and temptation, well, it's a threat for everybody, just waiting to grab the next person who comes along. So let's talk about this apprentice, Christoph Wagner. I mean, this guy had a front row seat to his master's eternal damnation. So the big question is, why in the world would he decide to walk that exact same path? Well, his journey is basically a four-step repeat and a parody of Faust's. First, he gets the inheritance, all the forbidden books. Next, he makes his own deal with a demon. Then he's off on a bunch of magical adventures. And spoiler alert, it all ends with him meeting the exact same fate as his master. The bill always comes due. But the book goes out of its way to make one thing crystal clear. Wagner is not Faust. Faust was this, monumental figure, a tragic hero searching for ultimate knowledge. Wagner? He's an imitation, a secondary scholar who's got all the dangerous ambition, but none of that deep philosophical drive. They actually call him a lesser Faust. Think about that. He's a copy, not an original. And that right there is the key to the whole story. He's not just the next in line. He's a straight-up parody of the original. And this quote just nails it. Wagner is like a distorted reflection in a mirror. He's copying all the moves, the magic, the ambition, but he's completely missing the internal depth. He's got the sin, but not the soul-searching that came with it. All right, now this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. When Wagner makes his pact with a demon, the whole tone shifts from tragedy to comedy. Okay, so remember, Faust dealt with Mephistopheles, a genuinely terrifying, profound vision of evil. Wagner, he summons a demon named Auerhahn. And Auerhahn, well, he likes to show up as a monkey or a big bird. Okay, so remember, Faust dealt with Mephistopheles, a genuinely terrifying, profound division of evil. Wagner, he summons a demon named Auerhahn. And Auerhahn, well, he likes to show up as a monkey or a big bird. Yeah, it's a little hard to take a demonic monkey seriously, right? And that's totally on purpose. The story starts using what's called low comedy, silly, almost slapstick stuff, and smashes it right into this epic, tragic legend. The whole point is to use satire to show that when you just copy ambition without understanding it, you don't look tragic. You just look kind of ridiculous. And the parody just keeps on going. So Faust was the master, and he had a demon servant. Now Wagner, who was Faust's servant, gets his own servant, a clown named Robin. This whole master-servant-servant chain is a huge source of comedy in the book, basically making fun of that dark relationship in the original. So, if Wagner wasn't after some kind of ultimate universe-bending knowledge like Faust was, then what did he want? Turns out his goals were a lot more practical, and that makes his journey a whole different beast.
Yeah, they call him a practical magician. Faust wanted to understand the cosmos. Wagner, he just wanted to do some really cool magic tricks to entertain people. And that totally changes the story, right? It's less of a grand tragedy and more of a cautionary tale that anyone could fall for.
Because of this, his story doesn't really have that big, dramatic arc like Faust's did. It's more like a series of adventures, told in episodes. We just follow him on his travels across the world, to places like the Orient and Africa, watching him do his magic and get into debates. And that really gets to the heart of what the Wagner book is all about. It's described as a fading echo of a grander tragedy, It's got the same wording, mess with dark magic and you'll pay the price, but it's told in a way that's sharper, more satirical, and honestly, just easier for everyday people to get. But let's not forget, for all the jokes and the adventures, this story has a very serious, moralizing Christian core. And that means Wagner's journey, well, it could really only end one way. And yep, just like his master, Wagner's path ends in eternal damnation. The message here is brutal and clear. It doesn't matter if you're the original sinner or just a copycat. The consequences are exactly the same. So the whole story really leaves us with 3 big takeaways. 1, evil doesn't just go away when one bad guy is gone, it sticks around. 2, this warning isn't just for geniuses like Faust, it's for everybody. And 3, sin is kind of treated like a disease that gets passed down from one person to the next. And this version of Wagner, the practical, kind of comical magician, he actually had a huge legacy. Over time, the character evolved, and you can see him pop up later, most famously in Goethe's Faust, as that super dry, pedantic academic. You know, the total opposite of the rebellious Faust. Which brings us back to that big question. Can just imitating a sin be as dangerous as committing the original act? The Wagner-Brooks answer is a loud and clear yes. It argues that just following someone else down a dark path, even if you don't have all the grand philosophical reasons, will lead you to the exact same fiery end.